Wheeler had seen many battles in his 40 years of service to the Observation Corps. He had recorded the fall of empires and the birth of alliances. He had watched species rise and crumble like sand castles against the tide of time, but nothing in his long career had prepared him for what he would witness in the system on that day. The Coalition fleet hung in the darkness of space like wounded animals waiting to die. 47 ships from 7 different species had gathered to stop the swarm, and they were losing badly. There were ancient predators, creatures with armor like black stone and acid that could melt through hull plating. They moved as one mind, thousands of ships controlled by a single queen, and they had been consuming worlds across 3 sectors for the past year. Wheeler stood at his observation post on the Coalition flagship, recording everything with the detached calm of someone who knew death was coming. His people, were slender beings with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They were scholars and record keepers, not warriors, and Wheeler had accepted long ago that his role was to document history rather than make it. The ship shook as another attack struck the shields. Alarms rang through the corridors. Somewhere below, crew members screamed as hull breaches opened their sections to the void. Commander of the Variks stood nearby, his reptilian face twisted in what Wheeler had learned to recognize as concern. The Variks were warriors, bred for combat across 10,000 years of evolution, and even they looked afraid. "We sent a distress signal to human space 3 days ago," Admiral Ohm announced from his command chair. The admiral was an older, his blue skin gone pale with age and stress. "There has been no response." "The humans will not come," Commander said. "They have no treaties with us, no obligations. Why would they risk their ships for strangers?" Wheeler had heard stories about humans. Every species in the galaxy had heard stories. They were a young race from a small world at the edge of known space. They had only achieved faster than light travel 200 years ago, a blink of an eye compared to the ancient civilizations of the Coalition. And yet every species that had encountered them spoke of humans with something between respect and fear. The Variks called them the persistent ones because they never stopped once they started something. The Meth called them death because their home planet was a nightmare of extreme temperatures and dangerous predators. The Hollow Ones simply refused to speak of humans at all, and no one knew why. Wheeler had never met a human. He had only seen images and read reports. They looked soft compared to other species. No claws, no armored skin, no natural weapons of any kind. He could not understand why anyone would fear them. "Even if the humans wanted to help," Admiral Ohm continued, "they are too far away. We will be dead before they could arrive." Another impact rocked the flagship. On the Wheeler watched a meth cruiser break apart under concentrated fire. Escape pods scattered into space, but the ships moved to intercept them. The swarm did not take prisoners. They only fed. Commander moved closer to Wheeler. The old Variks warrior had fought in dozens of campaigns, and his scales were marked with the scars of countless battles. He looked at the observer with eyes that held ancient knowledge. "If the humans do come," said quietly, "you must watch carefully. Do not look away no matter what you see, but also do not stand between them and their enemy. Do you understand?" Wheeler did not understand, but he nodded anyway. "I fought beside humans once," continued. 20 years ago during the border wars. I watched a human soldier run into a burning building to save Variks children he had never met. He burned alive doing it. And when we tried to stop his companions from going in after him, they fought us. They fought us to get to their friend, even though he was already dead." The Variks shook his head slowly. "I have never seen anything like it before or since. Humans do not process fear the way we do. They feel it, but it does not stop them. Nothing stops them once they decide something matters." Wheeler recorded these words, thinking they would be part of a historical document about the fall of the Coalition fleet. He did not expect to survive the day. The battle continued for another 2 hours. The Coalition lost 12 more ships, the lost nothing. Their numbers were endless, pouring through the system like a black tide. The Queen's flagship sat at the center of their formation, massive and terrible, directing every movement of the swarm. Wheeler was preparing his final message to the archives when the censor officer made a sound he had never heard before. It was something between a gasp and a prayer. "Admiral," the officer said, his voice shaking. "New contacts at the edge of the system, 12 ships, configuration unknown." Admiral Ohm turned to the bridge went silent. The ships that appeared were unlike anything Wheeler had seen. They were blocky and angular, built for function rather than beauty. They looked crude compared to the elegant curves of coalition vessels. They looked almost primitive. But there was something about them that made Wheeler's stomach tighten. Something about the way they moved, direct and purposeful, like predators who had spotted prey. "Identify them," the admiral commanded. The censor officer worked his console with trembling hands. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Human vessels, Admiral. The lead ship is broadcasting an identification signal. They call themselves the Steady Hand." The bridge erupted in chaos. Officers shouted questions. Commanders demanded explanations. How had they arrived so quickly? Why had they come at all? Wheeler simply watched and recorded. He remembered Commander's words, "Do not look away." The humans had come, and everything was about to change. The human fleet moved through space with a confidence that seemed almost arrogant. 12 ships against thousands. It was madness. It was suicide. And yet they did not slow down or change course. They flew straight toward the swarm like they had somewhere important to be. Wheeler studied the human vessels on his display screen. They were smaller than he had expected, each one roughly the size of a coalition frigate. Their hulls were thick and heavy, covered in what looked like armor plating rather than elegant shielding systems. They had no graceful lines, no artistic touches. They were boxes with engines, designed by people who cared more about survival than appearance. Admiral Ohm attempted to hail the human fleet 17 times. 17 times there was no response. The bridge crew grew more nervous with each passing minute. Some wondered if the humans had even noticed the coalition ships. Others whispered that perhaps the humans were here for their own reasons and would ignore the battle entirely. Then finally, a message came through. The face that appeared on the belonged to a human female. She had brown skin and dark hair pulled back tightly against her skull. Her eyes were the color of wet earth, and they held a calm that seemed impossible given the situation. She wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations except a small metal pin on her collar. "Coalition vessels," she said. "This is Captain Laura of the Steady Hand. We received your distress signal. We are here to help." Her voice was steady and flat. No emotion, no fear. She spoke like someone discussing the weather rather than entering a battle that had already killed thousands. Admiral Ohm leaned forward in his chair. "Captain, we are grateful for your response, but you must understand the situation. The number in the thousands. Your 12 ships cannot possibly make a difference. You should withdraw while you still can." Captain did not smile, but something shifted in her eyes. It might have been amusement. It might have been something else entirely. "Admiral, I appreciate your concern, but we did not travel 14 days at maximum burn to turn around at the finish line. My tactical officer is sending your fleet a set of coordinates. I need you to move your ships to those positions within the next 30 minutes. Lieutenant Commander Chris appeared in a smaller window on the screen. He was a pale man with red hair and a face covered in small brown spots that Wheeler later learned humans called freckles. He worked his console rapidly, sending data streams to every coalition vessel. Admiral Ohm studied the coordinates with confusion. "Captain, these positions would pull our fleet away from the flagship. We would be leaving the center of the battle." "Yes," Captain said. "That is the point. We need room to work. Your ships are not equipped for what comes next, and I do not want friendly fire incidents complicating matters." Commander stepped forward. His old eyes studied the human captain with an intensity that Veeler had never seen before. "You intend to engage the directly, in close combat?" It was not a question. Captain nodded once. "We have boarding teams ready to launch. Our target is the Swarm Queen. Kill her and they'll lose their coordination. They become animals instead of an army." The bridge fell silent. Boarding teams. The humans intended to board vessels, to fight the swarm face to face, claw to hand, in the dark corridors of alien ships filled with acid and death. No species had ever attempted such a thing. They were too fast, too strong, too numerous. Their ships were designed as living organisms, constantly shifting and changing with no clear paths and no safe spaces. Going inside a vessel was suicide. Everyone knew this. Everyone except the humans, apparently. "Captain," Admiral Ohm said slowly, "they are apex predators. A single warrior can kill a dozen armed soldiers before being brought down. Your people will be slaughtered." The human captain's expression did not change. "Admiral, my people volunteered for this mission. Every single one of them. They know what they are walking into. They know the odds. And they came anyway because someone out here asked for help and we were close enough to answer." She paused, and for just a moment, something warm flickered across her face. "That is what humans do. We show up. Now please move your fleet to the designated coordinates. We are beginning our approach." The transmission ended. Veeler watched as the 12 human ships accelerated toward the swarm. They did not spread out or attempt evasive maneuvers. They flew in tight formation, covering each other, moving as one unit toward the heart of the enemy fleet. They responded immediately. Hundreds of ships broke away from the main swarm to intercept the newcomers. Weapon fire filled the space between them, green and purple energy bolts designed to crack shields and melt armor. The human ships took hits. Their shields flared and sparked, but they did not slow down. They did not turn. They kept flying forward, returning fire with weapons that burned white-hot, punching through vessels like needles through cloth. Veeler had seen many species fight. He had seen the calculated precision of the Variks, the desperate ferocity of the Meth, the cold efficiency of the Hollow Ones. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to prove. They fought like death was not an ending but merely an inconvenience. They fought like people who had decided, somewhere deep in their souls, that failure was not an option. Small craft began launching from the human vessels. Boarding pods, each one carrying a team of human marines directly into the sides of ships. Veeler counted 47 pods in the first wave alone. Commander stood beside him, watching the same display. The old Variks warrior said nothing for a long time. Then, quietly, he spoke. "Now you see. Now you understand why we fear them. Not because they are strong, not because they are fast, but because they simply will not stop." Veeler recorded everything. He had a feeling that whatever happened next would be something the galaxy would need to remember. The sensor displays showed things that Veeler's mind struggled to accept. Inside the vessels, human life signs moved through corridors that should have been death traps. They pushed forward. They did not retreat. They did not stop. Coalition communication officers had managed to tap into human radio frequencies, and now the bridge of the flagship was filled with the sounds of combat. Gunfire, explosions, screaming, both human and underneath it all, something that made Veeler's blood run cold. The humans were talking to each other. Casual conversation mixed with violence. Jokes told between bursts of weapons fire. Laughter in the face of creatures that had slaughtered millions. "Danny, you got 3 coming up on your left," a female voice said through the speakers. "I see them, Maria. Tyler, cover the rear. These things like to circle around." "Copy that, Sarge. Man, these bugs are ugly up close." Focus on shooting them, not judging them. Move up. We need to hit the hive link chamber before they figure out what we are doing. Veeler learned their names by listening. Sergeant Danny Cole led a squad of 8 Marines through the largest vessel in the swarm. Corporal Maria Santos was their medic, though she seemed to spend as much time fighting as healing. Private First Class Tyler Grant was the youngest, barely 20 years old by human counting, and he chattered constantly like a nervous bird. They should have been dead 100 times over. They were faster than humans, stronger than humans. Their claws could slice through armor like paper, and their acid blood burned anything it touched. A single warrior was considered a match for 5 trained soldiers of any other species. But the humans did not seem to know this, or perhaps they simply did not care. Veeler watched the sensor data as Sergeant Cole's squad encountered a group of 12 warriors in a narrow corridor. Any tactical officer would have said the squad should retreat. They were outnumbered and outmatched. The smart move was to fall back and find another route. The humans charged forward instead. The audio feed became chaos, gunfire and roaring and the wet sounds of close combat. When it ended 30 seconds later, all 12 were dead. 2 humans were injured. None were killed. Maria, patch up. Tyler, grab his ammunition. We keep moving. Sarge took a claw through his shoulder. He needs. No available. Can you walk? A new voice tight with pain. I can walk, Sarge. I can fight too. Just give me a minute. You have 30 seconds. Then we move. Veeler turned to Commander. The old Varix was staring at the sensor display with an expression that Veeler had never seen on his face before. It took a moment to recognize it as awe. They are wounded, Veeler said. Badly wounded. Why do they not withdraw? Shook his head slowly. Because they have not finished what they came to do. I told you. Once humans decide something matters, nothing stops them. Not pain, not fear, not the certainty of death. On another frequency, Captain's voice cut through the noise. She was coordinating the entire operation from her ship, which was currently under heavy fire from 17 vessels. All teams report status. We need that hive link down in the next 15 minutes or we lose our window. Reports came in from across the fleet. Human Marines fighting in the dark. Human Marines dying in the dark. But also human Marines advancing, pushing deeper into enemy territory than any soldier of any species had ever gone. Admiral Ohm stood beside his command chair, forgotten cup of water in his hand. They are volunteers, he said softly. Captain said they all volunteered. They chose to do this. Yes, replied. That is the part that terrifies me most. They were not ordered to come. They were not forced. They heard that strangers needed help and they came running. What kind of species does that? Veeler thought about this question. His own people, they would never have answered such a call. They were scholars, not warriors. Self-preservation was written into their genetic code. The Varix might have come, but only if there was strategic value. The meth would have demanded payment first. But the humans had come for free. They had traveled 14 days at maximum burn, pushed their ships and their bodies to the breaking point, all to help people they had never met. People who had never done anything for them. People who were, by any reasonable measure, not their problem. It made no sense, and yet here they were. On the audio feed, Sergeant Cole's squad reached their objective. The hive-link chamber was a massive organic structure at the center of the flagship, filled with pooling nodes that connected the Swarm Queen to every warrior in her fleet. Destroy it, and they would lose their coordination. They would become individuals instead of a unified force. Charges set, Tyler Grant reported. 30 seconds to detonation. All units fall back to extraction points, Cole ordered. Maria, help Tyler take point. Sarge, we got incoming. Lots of incoming. The sensor display showed a wave of warriors converging on the squad's position. 50 at least, maybe more. They were crawling through the walls, dropping from the ceiling, pouring in from every direction. Hold them off, Cole said. His voice was calm, steady, like he was ordering lunch instead of making a last stand. The charges go off in 20 seconds. We just need to buy time. The audio feed dissolved into the sounds of desperate combat. Wheeler gripped the edge of his console, unable to look away, unable to do anything but watch and record. 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. The hive link chamber exploded. The sensors registered a massive disruption in communications. Across the entire swarm, thousands of warriors suddenly lost their connection to the Queen. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination began to drift. Attack patterns fell apart. Hive link is down, Captain announced over the fleet frequency. All teams push for secondary objectives. We are winning this. We are winning. Wheeler wanted to celebrate. He wanted to believe that the worst was over. But on the sensor display, he could see that Sergeant Cole's squad was still surrounded, still fighting, and their numbers were dropping. The battle was not over yet, not by a long way. 4 human ships were burning. Wheeler watched them on the sensor display, their hulls cracked open, their engines dark, their crews either dead or dying in the cold vacuum of space. 4 ships out of 12, 1/3 of the human fleet, gone in less than an hour. And yet the remaining 8 ships did not retreat. Wheeler had seen fleets break and run after losing far less. He had watched the proud Meth abandon their allies when casualties reached 15%. He had recorded the moment when a Varix battle group jumped to faster than light speed rather than lose another vessel. Every species in the galaxy understood the mathematics of war. When losses exceeded acceptable levels, you survived. You fought another day. The humans had apparently never learned this lesson. Captain's ship, the Steady Hand, had taken severe damage to its forward sections. Her bridge was partially exposed to space, sealed only by emergency force fields that flickered with every impact. Wheeler could see her on the communication screen, blood running down the side of her face from a wound she had not bothered to treat. All ships maintain pressure, she ordered. They are losing coordination. We push now or we lose everything we have gained. Captain, the Bright Morning is reporting critical hull failure. They are requesting permission to withdraw. His jaw tightened. On the tactical display, the Bright Morning was listing badly, fire spreading through her lower decks. Her captain, a young man named Peter, was trying to hold his ship together with desperate repairs and sheer willpower. Peter said, her voice softening slightly, "Get your people to the escape pods. We will cover your evacuation." "Negative, Laura. We still have weapons. We can still fight." "That is not a request, Peter. Your ship is dying. Save your crew." There was a long pause. Then's voice came back, heavy with something that might have been shame or might have been grief. "Understood, Captain. Bright Morning is abandoning ship. Give them hell for us." The escape pods launched from the Bright Morning moments before her reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the darkness like a small star, and then she was gone. 532 crew members reduced to escape pods drifting through a battlefield. Wheeler expected the loss to break something in the human fleet. He expected despair, or anger, or the kind of cold rage that led to mistakes. Instead, he heard Captain's voice on the fleet channel, steady as stone. The Bright Morning held the line. Her crew gave us the time we needed. Honor them by finishing what they started. All ships advance on the Queen's flagship. The 7 remaining human ships pushed forward. Behind them, coalition vessels moved to collect the escape pods, pulling human survivors to safety while their comrades continued to fight. Inside the flagship, Sergeant Cole's squad was dying. Wheeler had been tracking their progress since the hive link chamber explosion. They had been 8 Marines. Now they were 5, had fallen first, overwhelmed by warriors while covering the squad's retreat. A woman named had been next, pulled into a wall by something that the sensors could not identify. Cole, Maria Santos, Tyler Grant, and two others whose names Veeler had not learned were still alive. They were pushing toward the Queen's chamber, the heart of the swarm, even though extraction was no longer possible. "Sarge, we are cut off," Maria reported. "No way back to the boarding pods. They have sealed every corridor behind us." "Then we go forward," Cole replied. "The Queen is 3 levels up. We get there, we end this." "Danny," Maria's voice cracked slightly, "we are not getting out of here, you know that." "I know, but if we kill the Queen, every ship in this system has a chance. Every person on those coalition vessels goes home to their families. That matters, Maria. That matters more than us." Veeler felt something tighten in his chest. He had recorded thousands of hours of combat communications over his career. He had heard soldiers of every species face death in every possible way, but he had never heard anything like this. No bargaining, no denial, just acceptance and a determination to make their deaths mean something. Tyler Grant spoke up, his young voice trying hard to sound brave. "So we are going to be heroes, huh? My mom always said I would do something stupid and brave someday." "Your mom was a smart woman," Cole said. "Now shut up and check your ammunition. We have a Queen to kill." They pushed forward. The sensors tracked their movement through the organic corridors of the flagship, 5 small lights in a sea of enemies. Warriors came at them from every direction and they killed them all. They were wounded. They were exhausted. They were out of options. And they kept fighting. Admiral Ohm stood beside Veeler, watching the same display. The old's face was wet with tears he did not seem to notice. "They are going to die," he said quietly. "They know they are going to die and they are still fighting for us, for strangers." Commander nodded slowly. "Now you understand why all species fear humans, not because they cannot be killed. They die as easily as anyone else, but because killing them does not stop them. They just keep coming until either they win or there is no one left to fight." On the sensor display, Tyler Grant's life sign vanished. One moment he was there, fighting beside his squad. The next moment he was gone, killed by something in the darkness of the ship. The audio feed captured his final words, "Tell my mom I love her." Then nothing but gunfire, and the sound of Maria Santos screaming his name. The 4 remaining Marines did not stop. They did not mourn. They pushed forward, using their grief as fuel, letting their anger drive them toward the Queen's chamber. Veeler recorded everything. He had to. Someone needed to remember what humans were willing to do for people they had never met. The Swarm Queen was ancient. She had lived for 3,000 years, consuming worlds and growing her fleet, spreading across the galaxy like a disease. She had destroyed civilizations that thought themselves eternal. She had eaten species that no longer existed except in historical records. She was, by any measure, one of the most dangerous beings in the known universe. Sergeant Danny Cole killed her with a knife. Veeler watched the final moments on his sensor display, piecing together what happened from life signs and audio fragments. Cole's squad had reached the Queen's chamber with only 3 members remaining. Cole himself, Maria Santos, and a Marine named Park whose voice Veeler had barely heard throughout the battle. The Queen's guards met them at the entrance, 12 warriors, each one larger and faster than the soldiers they had faced before. Park went down first, buying the others time to push through. Maria took a wound to her leg that should have stopped her, but she kept moving, kept fighting, kept pushing forward. Cole reached the Queen alone. The audio captured pieces of the fight. The Queen was massive, her body filling the chamber, her claws as long as a human was tall. She should have killed Cole in seconds. She had killed thousands of warriors far more dangerous than one wounded human with an empty rifle. But Cole did not fight like a warrior. He fought like something else entirely. He dodged and rolled and climbed, using the Queen's size against her, staying too close for her claws to find him. When his ammunition ran out, he drew his knife. When his knife broke, he used the broken pieces. When he had nothing left, he used his hands and his teeth and his rage. The final audio transmission from inside the Queen's chamber lasted 11 seconds. Most of it was screaming, both human and. Then Cole's voice, barely a whisper, speaking words that Veeler would remember for the rest of his life. "Got you." The Queen's life sign vanished from the sensors. 3 seconds later, so did Cole's. The effect on the fleet was immediate and total. Without their queen, the swarm lost all coordination. Ships that had been attacking in perfect harmony suddenly turned on each other. Warriors that had fought as one mind became confused and afraid. The ancient intelligence that had held them together was gone, and they did not know how to function without it. The coalition fleet, supported by the surviving human ships, moved in to finish what the Marines had started. The battle lasted another 2 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. By the time the last vessel was destroyed, the threat that had terrorized 3 sectors was over. Veeler did not celebrate. He sat at his observation post and stared at the sensor display that showed the flagship, still drifting in space, now dark and silent. Somewhere inside that dead ship were the bodies of humans who had given everything for people they did not know. The final count arrived 3 days later. Of the 847 humans who had entered the battle, 312 survived, more than 500 dead. 500 men and women who had traveled 14 days to answer a distress call from strangers. Captain held a memorial service aboard the Steady Hand. The coalition ships were invited to watch via communication link, and Veeler made sure to record every moment. Stood at the front of her damaged bridge, her face still bearing the scars of battle, and read the names of every human who had died. It took almost an hour. She read each name clearly and carefully, giving each fallen soldier the dignity of being remembered. When she finished, she looked directly at the camera. These men and women did not die for glory or conquest. They did not die for territory or resources. They died because someone asked for help and they were close enough to answer. That is what we do. That is what we will always do, because no one should face the darkness alone. Veeler requested a meeting with Captain after the service. She agreed, and he traveled to the Steady Hand to speak with her in person. She was smaller than he had expected. Humans always were. Without their weapons and their ships, they seemed so fragile, so vulnerable, so ordinary. "I need to understand," Veeler said. "Your people knew they would die, many of them at least. They knew the odds and they came anyway. Why? What drives humans to sacrifice themselves for strangers?" Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was tired but warm. "I do not know how to explain it to someone who did not grow up on Earth. Our world is dangerous. It has always been dangerous. Predators, disasters, each other. We survived because we learned to work together. We learned that the person standing next to you matters, even if you just met them. We learned that sometimes you have to fight for people who cannot fight for themselves." She smiled slightly. "It is not complicated. Someone needed help. We could help, so we did." Veeler returned to the coalition flagship and completed his historical record. He wrote everything he had witnessed, every detail, every death, every act of impossible courage. And at the end, he added a warning for anyone who would read his words in the future. "Do not make enemies of humans, not because they will destroy you. They might, but that is not the true danger. The true danger is that they will die trying to protect others. They will throw themselves into impossible situations for people they have never met. They will sacrifice everything for the idea that no one should suffer alone. This makes them unpredictable. This makes them relentless. This makes them terrifying to anyone who would prey upon the weak." I watched humans enter the battlefield, and I finally understood why all species fear them. It is not their strength or their weapons or their courage. It is their hearts. They care too much. They fight too hard. They love too deeply. And there is nothing in the universe more dangerous than that. Veeler submitted his report and watched the human fleet depart. They were already responding to another distress signal from another sector. More strangers who needed help. More battles that were not their problem. They went anyway, because that is what humans do.